This is Episode 1B of the Ashen Covenant. If you have not listened to Episode 1A, I invite you to start there first. The journey begins with the crew's crash, their struggle to survive, and Verdham's first choice between freedom or chains. Now, Episode 1B continues the story. The darkness deepens. Ancient secrets awaken, and the true cost of survival is about to be revealed. The village elder raised the ash stone seal high. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the moment it would press against the gleaming metal tablet. Then the sky roared. A blast of cold wind ripped across the square. Torches blew out, thatched roofs trembled. Rain poured down, each drop stinging like fire. The seal shook in the elder's hand, stopped halfway down. A strangled voice screamed, "The god blocks it!" Another shouted back, "Heretics broke the rite!" Chaos erupted. The crowd shoved and stumbled, half bowing in panic, half running for their lives. Broker Vesk's image wavered like a reflection in storm water. Its edges blurred, his voice torn to shreds by the wind, then vanished entirely. Villagers wept, some prostrating in the mud, mumbling "Sky Messenger," but the probe still sat in the pit, its blue glow pulsing like a half-closed eye. In the tree line, Elara stared at the light. "He hasn't left," she whispered, voice low as the wind. "He's just waiting." The probe's signal jumped to a Heliox warship hanging in Verdham orbit. Inside the command deck, lit with cold metal gleam, the real Broker Vesk reclined in his chair. He pulled the hollow mask from his face, revealing dark skin scored with fine scars. His yellow eyes narrowed, burning with irritation. "A trembling village." "A weak elder," he growled, drumming his fingers on the armrest. "But bright iron doesn't lie. This vein belongs to Heliox, and I will take it, whatever it costs." He flicked his hand. Crew members nodded and brought up a wall of displays showing the ore veins deep under Verdham. Days later, the village was still gripped by fear. The crew found themselves caught between two tides, half the villagers calling them saviors, half cursing them as harbingers of doom. In the tent, the air was stifling. That was when Lisa appeared. She stood at the entrance, eyes fixed on Jax. Her voice came in sharp, halting bursts, hands moving in clipped signs. "There is place. Forbidden. Starmen." Solon translated for the group, piecing together each fragment. Jax nodded, pressed a hand to his chest, then pointed outside. "I go. With?" Fear and resolve flashed in Lisa's eyes. She whipped her cloak around and gestured. Jax drew his blade and followed. They vanished into the northern woods, the forbidden lands shunned by every Verdham generation. The forest was thick with mist. Lisa led, Jax half a step behind. She held up 3 fingers, then folded them into one. 3 weeks, since the night the seal faltered. She pressed her palm to her chest, then pointed forward. "Go into taboo." Jax nodded. He tapped a finger to his temple, speaking in the halting Verdham he had learned. "Understand. Some." Then he added Solon's hand sign, 2 fingers pinched together, silent. They slipped around ancient roots until a moss-covered cliff rose before them. Lisa stopped, put a finger to her lips. "Quiet." She untied her pouch, took out dry leaves and resin, and sprinkled them into a small ring at the cliff's base. Murmuring old syllables, she pressed a hand to her chest. "Beg. Mercy." Jax tilted his head. Lisa signed, palm flat to her brow. "Mother." A small fist over her heart. "Child." Then pointed to the cliff. Snapping 2 fingers open, light. Finally, she swept her hand hard. "Forbidden." Jax pieced it together slowly. When small mother saw light, forbidden. "To speak?" Lisa nodded sharply. She pointed to the mass of roots sealing the rock. Jax braced his native dagger and nodded. "Open." They pulled. Roots snapped with wet cracks. A metallic, earthy smell rushed out. Moss and soil rained down, revealing a narrow slit. From within, a blue glow pulsed, faint as a heartbeat under stone. Lisa mimed a rope around her neck. "Bound!" Then tore the air apart. "Break!" She pointed at the shining gap. Jax tightened his grip on the dagger. "Break!" Chains. "Understand." They tore the last of the roots away. The hole widened, just enough for one person to crouch and slip through. Lisa lit a torch and handed it to Jax. She placed a hand on the cold rock, closed her eyes for a breath as if steadying herself, then whispered, each word clear, "Enter, learn, truth." Jax raised the torch, letting firelight meet the eerie blue. The tunnel walls came alive, glowing faintly in the dark. He looked at Lisa, She nodded once. Together they crouched and disappeared into the mountain's heart. Jax crouched low, torch held near the ground. Lisa followed close, her shoulder brushing the cold rock. Their breathing echoed off the narrow gap, sounding like a ghostly wind. The moment they stepped fully inside, both froze. This wasn't a natural cave, it was a corridor, carved in perfect lines. The walls pulsed with a faint blue glow, brightening and dimming like veins under the earth. Sharp engravings ran along the surface, forming a lattice that stretched into the dark. Jax touched it. The surface was metal, cold, smooth, unlike anything native to Verdham. Not Verdham, he muttered, using the simple words Solon had taught him. Lisa nodded, eyes wide. She whispered, broken and halting, "Star." "People." Then she signed, 2 fingers pointing skyward, then drawing down to the ground. Jax understood. This place wasn't built by her people. They went deeper. Broad steps led them downward, worn with age but still whole. In a corner, a solid panel glinted, forged from a seamless, untarnished alloy. Jax raised the torch and revealed symbols carved into the surface, symbols nearly identical to the script Solon had painstakingly translated. His heart pounded. Lisa covered her mouth, her breath sharp. For generations, the old songs spoke only in fragments about sky ones who walked this ground. Now the proof stood before her. The space opened into a massive chamber. The arched ceiling rose high overhead, layers of metal reflecting the torchlight into 100 scattered sparks. There was no doubt. This was a star-born structure left by a power that had once set foot on Verdham. Jax stood in the center of the shadowed space, chest heaving. He turned to Lisa, eyes blazing in the pale blue glow. "We found the truth." At the far end, the light deepened, gathering around a massive block of alloy. It stood like a sealed gate, smooth as a dark mirror, covered with swirling engravings that matched the ancient fragments Solon had translated. Jax lifted the torch higher. The symbols flickered faintly, like circuits waking from a centuries-long sleep. "Still alive," he whispered. Lisa stepped closer, touched the surface, then yanked her hand back as if burned. Her eyes went wide. "Star, people, air." Jax placed his bare hand on the gate. The entire slab shuddered. The engravings flared, flooding the chamber with a deep blue light. Somewhere far inside, a massive mechanism groaned to life. Lisa staggered back, spine pressed against the wall, face drained of color. She crossed her arms over her chest, forming the Verdham sign for forbidden. Then she pointed at her heart and shook her head violently, but Jax didn't let go. Something in him knew. This door recognized him. The glow painted his face, showing a fierce, unshaken resolve. The gate didn't open. It just pulsed once, then dimmed, leaving the weight of its presence in their chests. Silence returned. Only their breathing filled the chamber. Then, a faint click echoed from deep beyond the barrier. A low, resonant hum followed, like a giant gear turning somewhere far below. Jax stiffened, torch trembling in his grip. "There's something inside." Lisa's hands shook as she signed, lips barely moving. Sleep. Waking, the sound stopped abruptly, leaving a suffocating quiet. No more blue light, only the flicker of the torch dancing across their faces. Jax tightened his grip on the dagger. His pulse hammered. One thought surged through him. This door isn't dead. It's waiting. While Jax and Lisa moved through the dark of the ancient tunnel, the ash temple in Verdham still burned with night fire. Mounds of sacred ash were piled high, the smell of bitter herb smoke seeping through every crack. High Seer Varric sat motionless beneath the vaulted roof, the half-mask of ash covering his face. Since the night the seal faltered, his authority had begun to crack. Half the village cried, the god stayed the hand, but the other half whispered that the Ashen cowl had failed, that the power of the ashes was no longer enough to resist the sky messenger. Whispers spread from house to house, from every hearthfire. Each murmur cut into Varric's authority like the slow stroke of a knife. He knew. If the doubt kept spreading, his throne of ash would collapse. In the stifling dark, Varric gripped the ash staff and whispered as if to remind himself, to keep the fire. I must borrow the fire of the sky. The blue glow of the probe flared in his mind's eye. Varric rose slowly. He knew what he had to do. Alone in the sealed inner sanctum, he removed the ash mask and set it before him. Half his face was revealed, scarred, weathered. His eyes burned like banked coals, anger and hunger ready to swallow the whole village. He thought of the people, those who had knelt at his feet only nights ago, now turning their gaze to the probe as if it were the true god. The Ashen cowl was losing its grip, and if he did nothing, his power would turn to dust. "Starborn," Varric hissed, knuckles white on the staff. "They've sown fear for generations. Now I will turn that fear into strength." In his mind, he saw the off-world crew, those strangers who stepped from the Skyfire, who carried the look of heresy. He was sure if he destroyed them, the people would bow again. But he needed a fire greater than theirs, one that would terrify all of Verdham. Varric tilted his head, hearing the wind howl outside, and let a thin smile creep across his lips. That fire waits for me. The Verdham night was thick with mist. The drums in the square were silent, leaving only the rustle of leaves. Varric stepped out of the ash temple, clutching the staff etched with burned sigils. Behind him, a handful of loyal acolytes followed silently, each bearing a torch and an ash bell. They crossed the wet grass and turned onto the narrow path leading to the northern field, where the Heliox probe still sat embedded in the soil. Its blue glow climbed into the mist, like a giant eye glaring down at the small procession. A young goat was dragged along, its bleating shrill and pitiful. Blood seeped from the slit at its neck, dripping in dark spots on the ground. Varric never looked back. He walked slowly, each strike of the staff on the dry earth sounding like a funeral drum. When they were only a few steps from the probe, the group stopped. Torchlight painted Varric's ash-streaked face, his eyes shining hungrily as he stared at the blue halo. He muttered through clenched teeth, "Skyfire, open the way for me." The northern field howled with wind. Before the probe, Varric planted the staff and shut his eyes. He gestured. The acolytes spread out, drawing a circle of ash. White smoke rose from the pouches they scattered around. A stone knife cut the goat's throat. Blood spilled and spread in a dark pool. Varric smeared the blood across the mask, face calm and unflinching. He raised his head and chanted, each word heavy and sharp. "Ash to feed the fire, blood to open the path. Sky Messenger, look down on us." The acolytes fell prostrate, striking the ash bells in a frantic rhythm. The clanging metal joined the wind, forming a sound that seemed to rise from the Earth's core. The probe stirred. Its blue light coiled upward, forming straight beams like threads stitching sky to soil. The air vibrated, hair lifting with static. One acolyte whispered, trembling, "The god is waking." Varric's eyes snapped open behind the blood-smeared mask, glowing with manic fire. Not a god, a flame, and I will be the one to hold it. The probe's glow gathered into a single vertical column. Then, in a heartbeat, it blossomed, forming the image of Broker Vesk. Half his face was hidden by a silver mask traced with spiral patterns, one golden eye gleaming coldly. The night fell silent. No wind, no bells. Only the quivering hologram cast its eerie blue light, washing the circle of ash in an unholy glow. The devotees lay flat on the ground, foreheads striking the ash, chanting through trembling lips, "You, messenger?" "Skyfire." Varric stood tall, head bowed slightly, yet his eyes behind the ash mask stayed locked on the glowing figure. Deep inside, he knew this was no god of the old chants, but something else, alien, dangerous, and truly powerful. Vesk waited, calm, his voice resonating through the probe's translator. It shaped his words into the tongue of Verdham, smooth yet chilling. "You called me? So? What do you want?" The cold timbre crawled over their skin. The devotees shook and pressed their faces deeper into the dirt. Varric's grip on the staff tightened. He sank to one knee, his voice booming like a prayer. "I want your fire! To burn out the heresy. To make Verdham bow beneath me again." The hologram of Broker Vesk tilted, like a predator lowering its head to inspect prey. His golden eye glinted. The mouth hidden behind the mask curved into a faint, unreadable smile. "You want fire?" His voice rumbled, every word deliberate. "In exchange, what will you give me?" Ash swirled in the strange wind. No one dared look up. Only Varric spoke, head lowered but voice proud. "I will give you the heretics, the one with the witchfire, the one who came from the sky. I will deliver them to you." The hologram pulsed, as if answering the vow. Vesk tilted his head, narrowing his eye. "They are nothing but strays. But you will open the gate. You will let the skyfire pour into Verdham." Varric struck his forehead to the ground, voice rasping. "I will open it. I am the firekeeper. I am the broker of the skyfire." The hologram shuddered, a soft laugh spilling out. Cold, scraping, metallic. Then from this moment, you will keep the ash and I will take Verdham's heart. The probe's blue light flared, casting Vesk's image sharper into the dark. Half his masked face remained motionless. Only the golden eye gleamed, hot as molten metal. He raised a hand, an illusion, but its long fingers looked sharp as steel claws. His voice stayed calm, implacable. You will be the broker of the fire. You will make Verdham kneel to me while believing they kneel to you. In return, you will open the path, lead me to the bright iron veins beneath this land. Still kneeling, Varric lifted his face, his voice quivering with dark excitement. The heretics will burn. The people will see me as the chosen one. Your fire, I will guard it. Vesk's hologram inclined slightly, voice laced with mockery. Fire cannot be guarded. It only burns. It only devours. And when it is done, ash is all that remains. The word sent the acolytes even lower to the ground, muttering, Ash, 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 like a new prayer. Varric clenched his staff, forcing his voice to stay steady. As long as I stand at the crest of the firestorm, as long as ash covers all, I will be the one left whole. Vesk's eye gleamed, part approval, part scorn. He raised his spectral hand higher, and the probe flared brighter. Very well, High Seer, prepare yourself. When the gate opens, I will return, and you will be my keeper of the fire. The blue light died. The hologram vanished. Only the probe remained, pulsing faintly, like a cold heart buried in the earth. Varric stayed kneeling in the darkness. Ash coated his cloak and shoulders. Behind the mask, his mouth curled into a victorious smile. The fire is mine, he whispered, almost delirious. Verdham is mine. The ash bells rang, the sound carrying like a dirge across the night. The devotees struck them again and again, chanting with shaking lips, Ash! 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 Varric rose, lifting the staff high. The ash mask covered his face once more. His voice thundered fanatical. The fire has chosen me. The ashen cowl will burn out the heresy. Verdham will bow again. In the pit, the probe's blue light throbbed, each pulse stretching Varric's shadow across the ground. A shape that looked less and less like a man, and more like a creature born of fire and ash. The devotees broke into sobs. Some clawed their own flesh, adding blood to the offering, turning the ash beneath them into a pool of red mud. Varric thrust his staff toward the northern woods, where the off-world crew hid. His voice cracked like a whip, each word a command. Begin the fire hunt! The staff struck the ground. Ash burst into a choking cloud, rolling with the wild cries of the faithful. At the edge of the pit where the Heliox probe sat buried, a lone ashen cowl sentinel stood guard, hands shaking in the cold. The blue glow of the probe gathered and condensed. Vesk's image appeared before him, seen by him alone. Through the probe's translator, the voice slid into Verdham's tongue, cold and curt. Take this to your master. The probe shuddered. A small cylindrical device shot from a hidden compartment, floated briefly, then landed gently in his palms. The sentinel cradled the glowing object as if it were holy. He bowed low and ran through the night fields toward the ash temple. The temple doors slammed open. He dropped to his knees and held the object aloft. Varric froze mid-step, then rasped, Set it down! The device touched the wooden floor. Blue light flared wide. In its heart, Broker Vesk appeared, his single golden eye gleaming like molten metal. He glanced at Varric once, then spoke slowly, every word deliberate. You lead your people. I give you fire from the sky. When you raise your staff, the signal triggers. My drones will descend on the coordinates you send. Drive the crowd into the granary. The fire will do the rest. When the smoke covers the sky, call them heretics. Varric's breath caught. Behind the mask, his eyes flared as though he had just seen his destiny. He nodded very slowly. Dark smoke choked the sky as the crew arrived. Hot ash swirled everywhere, the air thick with burning resin. Noor knelt beside a choking boy, her hands trembling as she pressed a pouch of herbs to his chest, whispering urgently, Breathe! Come on, breathe! But the child's eyes had already gone glassy, his skin streaked with ash. Noor broke into tears, her blackened hands shaking uncontrollably. Pax hauled a bucket from the well and hurled water onto a burning roof. Steam hissed, but the fire only roared louder, forcing him back. He slammed his fists against the well's rim, eyes bloodshot. No, no, it won't go out! Jax, his shoulder still bandaged, threw himself at the collapsing infirmary. he shouted, trying to heave up a burning beam. Flames singed his hair, the smell of scorched flesh filling his nose. He slammed his fist against the wood, roaring like a wounded animal. Monsters! I'll tear them apart! Through the chaos, Elara stood frozen, firelight flickering across her face, her eyes wide with strain. Her heart screamed to follow Jax, but in her mind, the oath of Earth rang like a verdict. Do not interfere with native development, she shouted over the roar of fire, voice cutting through smoke and wind. Enough! Fall back! Don't throw your lives away! Jax spun, eyes blazing. Fall back? They're burning the whole village! And we just watch? Elara clenched her fists so hard her nails dug into her skin. She didn't answer. She just dragged Jax back from the collapsing tent, letting his fury crash against her like a wave. She stood in the center of the ash-choked square, black smoke coiling around her like a curtain. Another roof caved in with a crash, fire spearing into the gray-purple sky. Her pulse hammered in her chest until it hurt. Do not interfere with native development. The words echoed in her skull, the cold voice of the Oversight Council repeating them. They had said it again and again. No matter if the natives lived or died, whether war or peace consumed them, Earth's duty was only to witness, never to intervene. But here, Noor knelt over a lifeless child, her hands smeared with blood and soot. Jax was howling in rage. Pax had collapsed, the useless water bucket rolling across burning ground. This was no longer a lesson. This was life. Real lives. Elara's fists trembled. Wet ash smeared in her palms, sticking black. Smoke burned her lungs, forcing her eyes shut. But the images only came clearer, faces lost in the fire, children's cries fading into silence. Not interfere. Or not save, she whispered, voice hoarse as if asking herself. The war inside her tore her apart. If she kept the oath, they would become bystanders watching a people burn. If she broke it, they would become traitors to Earth. Both paths cut into her heart like twin blades. Elara slowly opened her eyes. Before her, the granary was nothing but a smoldering heap, smoke curling skyward like black fingers clawing at the heavens. Noor's head was bowed, sobs racking her. Pax gasped for air, chest heaving in the stench of char. And Jax stared at her, pleading and furious all at once. Elara knelt, scooped a handful of warm ash, and crushed it in her palm until black dust spilled through her fingers. The earth oath rang in her head once more. But this time she spoke aloud, voice low and hard. Their law. Can't keep anyone alive here anymore. She rose, her voice breaking but sharp as steel, echoing through the smoke. I swear to protect the people of Verdham, even if it means breaking the ban, even if it means defying those who sent us here. Noor looked up, eyes red and wet, her trembling hand giving a small nod. Pax glanced down at the ash on his tunic, then back at Elara, and bit his lip before nodding hard. Jax clenched his fist until blood welled between his fingers, growling under his breath. Finally! You said what I've been waiting for. The ash fell from her hand, mixing into the soil. This vow was not heard on faraway Earth. It was carved here, in the burning heart of Verdham. Smoke hung thick over the sky, turning the moon into a pale blur. Ash stuck to the crew's faces, their hair, their clothing. Elara stepped forward, eyes blazing in the dying firelight. She looked toward the northern fields, where the Heliox probe still blinked steadily, like an unblinking eye. You think you can swallow Verdham in ash? She murmured, her voice breaking but unyielding. But if you want this world's heart, you'll have to step over me first. Wind swept through the square, scattering embers into the night. For an instant, her silhouette against the distant blue probe looked like a statue cut from smoke and fire. Pax gripped his hammer. Noor wiped her tears. Jax stood silent, fists clenched. They knew the path had split, and there was no going back to Earth. Midnight came. Above Verdham March, the silver moon dimmed as a massive dark shape descended, blotting it out. The quiet after the fire was ripped apart by a distant roar, thunder rolling across the sky. In the village square, the people stared upward, pointing with shaking hands at the shadow swallowing the stars. Whispers spread like fire. Sky fire! The wrath of the heavens. From the northern ridge, the crew of the Wayfarer crouched beneath the pines, eyes locked on the horizon. Elara gripped her crude mechanical binoculars, refusing to use advanced tech, and watched. High above, a vast metal frame was unfolding, a machine hanging like a plow poised to rip the sky apart. On orbit, Inside the Heliox command deck, Vesk stood motionless before the array of screens. He raised one hand and gave the order, voice sharp. "Lower the rig! Let them see the wrath of the sky before I take its heart." In the dark belly of the warship, dozens of technicians strapped in. Warning klaxons blared, red numerals scrolling across the control boards. The atmospheric rig, the massive machine the cartel called the Sky Plow, was released from its cradle, dropping away from the ship's hull. From the ground, it was only a spreading shadow. But on Vesk's screens, every detail was clear. Vanes hundreds of feet long unfurling, sweeping the upper air. Resonance amplifiers glowing as they locked onto the bright iron seam detected by the surface probe. Shock vortices colliding, gouging the atmosphere like invisible plowshares. "Report resonance strength," Vesk growled. A technician's voice wavered. "Bright iron signal strong. Upper layer stable. Extraction trial is possible." Vesk tilted his head, the smile hidden behind his half-mask razor thin. "Good. Do not harvest. Just let them see." The final order was given. The rig descended lower, opening its full array. The skies over Verdham howled, as if the entire firmament was being turned upside down. The rig drifted lower, its true shape coming into view. From the ground, it looked like a single, massive shadow. But under the artificial flashes of light, every detail lit up for an instant. A cross-shaped metal frame, each arm stretching hundreds of feet, unfurling like the wings of a colossal bat. At the frame's center, a glowing core pulsed with orange-red light, beating like a mechanical heart. The veins spread wide, releasing invisible vortices that swept downward toward the earth. When the field reached the bright iron vein buried deep below, it pulled ionized particles skyward. Thin streaks of light drifted up, weaving into silver ribbons that twisted across the sky like molten silk. From the tree line, Pax muttered under his breath, scrawling on a charred scrap of wood, "Induction field. Third-order resonance. They're not pulling the ore. They're mapping the vein." Elara gripped her binoculars tighter, face pale. To the villagers, this was the wrath of heaven. But to the crew, it was a trial plow, a colossal test run, preparing the way for full extraction. The skies over Verdham changed color. Here, green like a deep lake. There, violet-silver like cracked glass. The metallic clouds twisted into long glowing streamers that stretched from the horizon to the peak of the keep. Thunder rolled, but not from storm clouds. It was the deep boom of colliding resonance waves, each pulse shaking the chest like a war drum. Every time the rig emitted a surge, the whole sky flashed, then roared like some colossal beast. Beneath the ground, strange phenomena erupted. The iron spearheads of the Ashen cowl glowed blue, thin flames dancing like ghostly fire. Thatch at the village edge began to smoke, blackening as glowing dust fell on it. The air reeked of hot metal and ozone, making everyone cough and gag. Animal fur and human hair rose, crackling with static. A farmer dropped to his knees, screaming, "The sky is angry! The ash wasn't enough, now comes the bright fire!" In an instant, panic swept through the village. Everyone knelt, foreheads to the ground. Only the howling wind and the storm of light remained, like the roar of an unseen god. When the glowing dust fell like silver ash, chaos broke loose. Some collapsed fully, pounding their heads into the dirt. Others grabbed their children and backed into the walls, sobbing. Prayers rang out across the square. "Spare us! Skyfire! Spare us!" Through the hysteria, High Seer Varric mounted the temple steps. The torch in his hand flared blue from the metal dust, burning like a holy fire. His voice boomed through the ash mask. "You have seen it! The witchfire has called down the wrath of the sky. If the heretics are not burned, Verdham will drown in the bright fire." The Ashen cowl dropped to their knees, then sprang to their feet, raising their ash spears and shouting, "Burn the heretics! Burn the heretics!" A few villagers shook with fear, daring to protest, but they saved our people. Before the words were finished, two Ashen cowl warriors seized the speaker, slammed him to the ground, and forced his forehead into the dirt. The square went silent, save for the crying of children, swallowed by the chants of the zealots. From a distance, the crowd looked like a vast, writhing sea of bodies under the silver-blue glow, all of them bowing to the rig hanging above. To them, the alien machine was no longer strange technology. It was proof of divine punishment. At the forest's edge, Elara Wynn held her breath. Before her, the entire village was on its face, prostrated under the floating rig. Sweat ran down her temple despite the icy wind. Her voice cracked. "This isn't a miracle. It's a survey run. The cartel is clearing the way." Pax Delane crouched low, charcoal scratching rapidly across the blackened wood, filling it with spirals and figures. His eyes shone, both terrified and feverishly alive. Third-order resonance strength matches probe readouts. If we phase-shift the field by even a fraction, we can jam it. "We can stop them!" Elara hissed, yanking him back. "Not now!" "We don't have the strength," Solon Aris whispered, listening hard to every shouted word from the square. "Skyfire! Heretic! They believe it all. Their language has become a weapon." Nur Sato coughed hard, wrapping a scrap of cloth around her mouth and shoving pieces into the other's hands. "This dust is toxic. The old and the children won't survive if it keeps falling. We need to shield them somehow." Jax Wren gripped the hilt of his knife, glaring up at the rig blazing across the sky. "We just sit here and watch? One shot from the pulse gauntlet and that thing drops like a rock." Elara turned, her eyes sharp as glass. "No, the moment we reveal Earth tech, we lose everything. The only way forward is to survive with them and find another way." Silence fell over the group. Above, the rig kept roaring, layer after layer of light storm sweeping across the sky like a suspended death sentence. And it wasn't just fear the rig spread, it was reshaping the land itself. At the village edge, a thatched roof caught the glowing dust. Blue fire crawled along every dry stalk. Villagers tried to beat it out with bare hands, but that only fanned the flames. A scream ripped the night, and the house collapsed, turning the narrow lane into a tunnel of fire. In the smithy, a hammer struck the anvil just as the silver dust rained down. The sparks multiplied tenfold, blazing so bright the blacksmith fell to his knees, crying, "The fire god is here!" and bowed on the workshop floor. Out in the fields, the livestock panicked from the static charge. Cattle kicked and crashed through fences, horses reared, scattering into the dark. Their cries merged with the wailing of children until the whole countryside was one long scream. An old man clutched a local compass rod, then shouted as the needle spun madly. He collapsed, face white with terror. "The ground is turning, Verdham is about to flip." The word spread like a disease. Some cried that the sky comes to claim the ash. Others shouted that the heretics have called down the bright storm. In the chaos, the Ashen cowl's grip on the people tightened. No one dared stand against them. At the forest's edge, Elara watched, her chest heavy as stone. With every minute the rig stayed in the air, Verdham lost another piece of its faith in itself. On orbit, the light from the screens painted Broker Vesk's face in cold steel hues. He stood with arms folded, golden eye blinking in time with the resonance feed from below. A technician bowed his head, voice trembling. "Resonance field at peak, but not fully stable. Shall we drop lower?" Vesk tilted his head, the edge of a thin smile curling beneath the half-mask. "No, not yet. Let them see. Before they lose it all." He stepped closer to the display, tapping the section showing Galdwin Keep glowing red. "Make them fear. Make them believe the sky is angry. Once fear takes root, I only have to reach out my hand, and they will kneel." His last words struck like iron on stone. The rig thundered overhead, scattering more light onto Verdham like a curse from heaven. The rig's next pulse was stronger. From the hills, the whole expanse of Galdwin Keep trembled. Ancient stone that had stood for centuries cracked, hairline fractures spidering across the inner courtyard. Pax kept scrawling data onto the blackened wood scrap. Each pulse made his lines spike higher. At the third one, he froze, eyes wide. It's not random. The resonance peak. It's locking onto the Keep's coordinates. Elara yanked the board from his hands. The black graph lines converged into a single peak, stabbed right into Galdwin. Her fingers clenched so hard they trembled, equal parts fear and fury. In the village square, the glowing dust spun into a tiny cyclone right at the center of the fortress yard. The villagers saw it and screamed, "The ground is turning! The keep will sink!" Panic tore through the streets. Parents grabbed their children and fled. Others fell to their knees in the cobblestones, eyes rolling white. To the people of Verdham, the keep, their heart, was now cursed by heaven. At the tree line, Elara stared toward the fortress, heart hammering. The price was coming due, faster than any of them expected. The rig's shadow swallowed the moon, draping Verdham in an artificial night. The electric wind hissed over the rooftops, shrieking like knives scraping iron. Then the sky exploded with light. A rain of silver dust poured down. Thatch smoldered. The smithy flared green. Villagers shrieked and dropped to their knees. On the temple steps, Varric raised his staff high and bellowed, "You see it now! This is the sky's judgment. The heretics must be given to the ash." In the forest, Pax's hands trembled as he handed the charred wooden slate to Elara. The black line stabbed straight into the coordinates of Galdwyn Keep. He exhaled, his voice cracking. "The resonance peak is right under the fortress." Elara looked past the treetops. Far away, the keep shook inside the spiral of glowing dust. Verdham's heart was under direct aim. Ash blew across her face. She whispered, whether to her crew or to herself, no one could tell. "If we don't stop this place will sink." That night, as the rig finally drew back, the sky above Verdham still bore a pale silver scar, glowing faintly like a burn mark. The villagers were spent, some still kneeling in the square, others stumbling home in silence. But the terror didn't fade. It clung to every rooftop, to every hushed breath. At the village edge, the hatch of an old wine cellar creaked open. Elara motioned for her crew to descend first, then was the last to close the lid behind her. The air below was damp and sour, reeking of rot and bitter alcohol. Torchlight flickered over the anxious faces of the elders and smiths who had been secretly summoned. Elara straightened in the cramped space, eyes sweeping the room. Above, the Ashen cowl had seized the people's faith with fire and ash. If the crew stayed hidden, Verdham would soon fall entirely into Vesk's grasp. Her fists clenched. She spoke softly, but her voice carried weight. "This is when we try. If we don't win their trust now, they'll kneel until they die." Elara stepped into the center of the cellar, torchlight catching the smoke-dark rings around her eyes. Around her, several village elders sat pressed against the walls, waiting for the words of the Sky People. Behind her, Pax, Nor, Solon, and Jack stood tense, each of them strung tight as wire. Solon reached inside his tunic and brought out a small box, placing it on the wooden table. The crude translator crackled, lights flickering, its casing built from a scorched antenna shell, jury-rigged circuits, and a wooden sound tube. He and Pax had spent days secretly piecing it together from hidden Wayfarer parts. Elara took a long, steady breath, then spoke slowly. "You saw the skyfire, but it was no punishment from the gods. It was the machine of an enemy from above. They will drain this land until nothing is left but ash and stone." The translator buzzed, spitting out a rough, broken voice in the local tongue. "You saw skyfire. No god. Machine from high. They take Earth's belly, leave only ash." The words were blunt, but the meaning hit like a hammer. The elders froze, faces paling. One of them gasped, "The Earth's belly! Spirits save us!" Another elder scowled, gripping his staff tight. "Then what are you? Heresy bringing doom. Or saviors?" Elara didn't look away. "We are not gods, not demons. We are those who were left behind. But if you want to live, you must stand with us. The cartel is stronger than Verdham and stronger than us. Only together is there a path forward." The translator rasped, mangling the words, which somehow made them sound even more grave. The villagers glanced at one another, restless, caught between fear and belief. Elara stepped closer, her voice like a blade. "This alliance must stay secret. We will teach you to build tools strong enough to fight back, but we will not reveal where we come from. If the cartel finds out, not only we, but you will die." A heavy silence fell. Only the hiss of breathing and the crackle of the torch broke it. When Elara finished, murmurs rippled through the room. Some nodded, some still frowned. To seal the moment, she gestured for her crew to step forward. Pax Delane pulled a handful of iron scraps and char from his satchel, setting them on the table. He shaped them into a crude hammerhead, then fixed a small wooden catch to it. "We'll teach you to forge steel stronger than what you have now, and turn it into weapons tougher than wooden bows or stone hammers. But they can't look too strange. Anyone who sees them must think they were made by your hands." The translator stuttered and clipped the words until they came out jagged. "We teach forge, strong steel, weapons, look like craft. No suspect." The villager's eyes widened. An old smith's hand shook as he nodded at last, slow but resolute. Nor Sato stepped forward, pulling several bundles of dried local herbs from her satchel. "I've cured fevers with these before, but that glowing dust outside will kill faster than any fever. I'll teach you how to brew it into medicine, and how to wear the leaves over your chest so you can breathe." The translator stuttered, spitting out a broken version. "I cure fever, but bright dust kills fast. I teach medicine to breathe." The choppy words made the elders glance at each other, fear and hope warring in their eyes. Solinara stepped forward next. unrolling a soot-stained cloth covered with hand-drawn symbols. Circles, slashes, tiny dots. These are the signs we'll use among ourselves. One circle means spies nearby. 2 dots means danger. With these marks, we will know, while outsiders remain blind. The translator buzzed. These marks? Secret. We know. Outsiders. Not know. One elder bowed his head, trembling fingers brushing the charcoal marks as his eyes lit with understanding. Finally, Jax Wren stepped forward. He didn't present a tool. He simply placed a hand on the shoulder of Lysa Morwyn, who stood quietly in the corner. I'll stay and protect her, and anyone who chooses to stand with us. When the fight comes, I'll be the first to face it. The translator distorted the words but left their meaning clear. I protect. If fight, I first. A ripple ran through the room. Several of the younger villagers sucked in sharp breaths, glanced at one another, then nodded. For the first time in this cellar, it wasn't only the elders agreeing, but the youth too. Torchlight wavered, painting the villagers' faces in gold and shadow. Each garbled word from the translator left new looks in its wake. Fear, belief, suspicion, hope. An old blacksmith, his hands still scorched from beating out fires earlier, nodded slowly. Steel, that's harder. If we can forge it, Verdham will have more than farm tools. His voice trembled, but there was a spark in his eyes. Another elder, his long beard gray as ash, shook his head violently. This is heresy. You would turn my grandchildren into servants of sky demons? He pointed a bony finger at Solon, where the soot-marked cloth still lay on the table, suspicion sharp in his tone. The tension in the room tightened like a drawn bowstring. Then a middle-aged woman, the same one whose child Noor had saved, suddenly dropped to her knees, forehead touching the floor. If they saved my child, I'll trust them. Even if they are heretics, at least they won't let us die choking in the bright dust. Her choked sob broke something in the air. A few faces softened. A cluster of young men at the back gripped their wooden staves, then gave silent, firm nods. The divide was clear now. Supporters. Those who had been saved or seen their power firsthand. Opponents. Staunch Ashen Cowl faithful who saw this as a trap. Undecided. The majority, watching to see which way the balance tipped. Torchlight gleamed against the low timber ceiling, smoke thickening until each breath felt heavy. Elara waited for the whispers to fade. When only the crackle of fire remained, she stepped forward. Her voice was low but rang like a struck anvil. You want to survive, we'll help you. But hear me well, we do not bring you miracles, only tools. Tools forged from your own fire and steel. We only show the path. She drew her finger through the dust on the table, leaving a single line. This is the boundary. On this side, what we can share. Stronger steel, faster cures, ways to guard against the bright dust. But beyond this line, things that do not belong to this world, you will never see. Cross that line and there is no coming back. The translator rasped, voice hoarse, cutting words off mid-syllable. We give tools, no miracle. Boundary, no cross. If cross, no return. Several elders nodded, faces shadowed but understanding. They would not get everything, only what was needed to survive. The price of alliance was to accept its limits. Elara's final words fell like hammer blows, cold and sharp. If you agree to live within this boundary, we stand together. If not, we leave Verdham tonight. In the cellar, silence lay heavy as stone. The villagers stared at one another, realizing this was no longer a simple choice, but a vow to live or a surrender to die. The air was dense, pressing in from every side. Torchlight flickered over taut faces, and Elara's last words cut through the room like a blade drawing a line on the floor. One side life, the other death. Suddenly Pax Delane pulled something from his satchel. It was the prototype crossbow, a native wooden stock fitted with a metal trigger and an unnaturally taut bowstring. He placed it on the table where the torchlight revealed every joint, every blend of crude and precise workmanship. This is an example. A weapon that looks like yours, but strikes many times stronger. He drew the string and fired. The thwap cracked through the cellar, and the bolt buried itself deep in the wall, shaking loose a rain of dust and old wine fumes. The room went deathly still. Then someone inhaled sharply. The translator rasped, breaking up the words but keeping their edge. Weapon looks like yours. Stronger! An old blacksmith stepped forward, hand trembling as he touched the metal trigger. He jerked back as if shocked, but his eyes lit up with raw hope. At that moment, an elder slammed his staff on the ground and shouted, "Heresy! You bring demon-forged tricks, dressed in false skins to deceive us." The cellar erupted. Some fell to their knees, pledging belief. Others leapt up, shouting curses. Still others just stood frozen, eyes darting, torn between fear and faith. Elara strode forward, her voice ringing like hammered iron. "No sorcery. No demons. This is a tool to survive. Refuse it if you wish, but then prepare for Verdham to be buried in ash." The words sliced the uproar in half. A tense silence followed, and then a faint sound above. A creak. The wooden boards shifted, as though someone was stepping on the hatch. Every breath in the room froze. The hatch sealed them off from the outside world. Torchlight danced wildly over the walls as everyone realized what was said here could never reach other ears. The crossbow bolt still quivered in the cellar wall, dust falling like slow rain. One villager dropped to his knees, praying. Another shouted in anger. Elara stood in the center, forcing both sides to face the same choice: live or die. The sound above grew louder. Someone was standing on the hatch. A clod of dirt fell through the gap, snuffing in the torchlight. All eyes turned upward. No one dared breathe. Then a thin beam of light split the darkness. A soot-stained hand pushed the hatch open, and a single glaring eye peered in. An Ashen cowl's spy. Pax shoved the prototype crossbow into Jax Wren's hands. Jax didn't hesitate. Thwop! The bolt punched through the wood, landing just beside the spy's eye. A scream tore through the night, and the figure stumbled back, scrambling away into the dark. The cellar was frozen in shock. The villagers had just seen it with their own eyes. This weapon was no trick. It was fast, powerful, and it could protect them. The old blacksmith panted, voice trembling as he whispered, "Not demon magic. This is a true weapon." Elara glanced at Jax, then at the faces now blazing with a new, dangerous hope. She knew this choice had opened the door. The villagers would believe, but the news would spread quickly. 2 days later, the rumor had swept through all of Verdham. Some whispered, "The heretics hide demon weapons beneath the earth." Others swore, "They have weapons that will save us from the ash and bright dust." One gray afternoon, the village drums beat furiously. The people gathered in the square before Galdwyn Keep. Elders sat in rows. Blacksmiths, farmers, and those Nor had healed all came. The air was tense, thick with drifting ash. High Seer Varric had yet to appear, but the Ashen cowl had already taken position at the steps. Ash spears planted, their eyes full of suspicion. Across the square, a cluster of young villagers stood shoulder to shoulder with the crew, faces hard, ready. A neutral elder, his silver beard reaching his chest, struck his staff hard against the ground. "Tonight the village will decide. The ones from the far sky. Do we keep them as allies, or give them to the ash?" The square erupted at once. Supporters, "They saved my child!" "Without them, the fever would have taken the whole village." Opponents, "They called the sky fire down. If we don't offer them up, the heavens will punish us." The elder raised his hand and slammed the staff again, his voice cutting through the noise. "No more delay. One of them must step forward and speak before all of Verdham. We will see with our own eyes if they truly stand with us." Hundreds of eyes turned toward the Wayfarer crew. Elara's brow tightened and she started to move. But Jax had already stepped forward. His face tense but resolute. For 2 days, Solon and Pax had worked without rest, dismantling old Wayfarer parts, swapping out audio filters, fitting a brass local-made amplifier tube. When they tested it, the translator's voice had grown clearer, the cadence more natural, enough to carry meaning without sounding like some ghostly curse. Thanks to that, when the village demanded one from the sky to speak, the crew knew they finally had the tool to make themselves understood. Jax Wren walked to the center of the square. He wore a borrowed brown cloak to blend in, but his tall frame and unyielding gaze drew every eye. At his side, the translator box was strapped tight with rope, its amplifier glowing faintly. He did not speak immediately. Instead, Jax reached back and pulled Lysa Morwen from the crowd, bringing her to stand at his side. She hesitated, but his steady look made her nod. The square rippled with murmurs, a few sharp gasps breaking the air. Then Jax's voice rang out, low and strong. "I will not hide behind others' words. I choose to stand with her, and with all of you. If the cartel wants this land, they will have to step over me first." The translator spoke in the Verdham tongue, this time almost perfectly. "I stand with Lisa. I stand with Verdham. Cartel wants land. Must go through me first. The square erupted again. Some of the young men who had seen Jax fight cheered, raising their wooden staves, shouting, "With Jax! With Verdham!" Women who had seen Nor heal their children wept openly, clutching them tight, whispering prayers for the Sky People's strength. But the Ashen cowl line stiffened. One masked zealot hissed, "The heretic has bewitched our daughters!" His words struck the crowd like fire to oil. Some villagers recoiled from Lisa in fear, others shouted in anger. Ashen cowl spears struck the ground in unison, a drumming of threat. On the steps, the neutral elder scowled, banging his staff 3 times until the noise dimmed. "Order! Order!" The Wayfarer crew stood tense. Elara crossed her arms, her face like carved ice, caught between pride at Jax's courage and dread that he had broken protocol. Pax said nothing, but his mind replayed the sight of the prototype crossbow bolt thudding into the wall, the villagers cheering. Nor exhaled softly, a faint relief crossing her face that at least some of the village now believed. Solon narrowed his eyes, committing every phrase to memory, knowing the Verdham language had just become the battlefield for what was to come. The square was split, violently polarized, one side cheering, one side calling for fire, and between them hundreds of wavering eyes, waiting for the balance to tip. By the next morning, the news had spread like wildfire. The Skyman has chosen to stand with Lysa Morwyn. For many of Verdham's youth, Jax became a symbol of defiance. They began gathering near the smithy, asking to be taught how to use the improved crossbows, whispering that Jax would lead them when the day came. On the stone outcrop outside the village, someone had scrawled with charcoal in rough, shaky script, "Jax, keeper of the fire." But on the other side, the Ashen cowl faithful seethed. They whispered that Lisa was bewitched, that the Sky People used demon tools to seduce the villagers. One night, a few zealots hurled stones at Lysa's healing hut, forcing Jax to stand guard outside, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Even within the Wayfarer crew, the air had changed. Elara wanted more than once to reprimand Jax, but each time she saw the village youths gathering around him, she stayed silent, nor worried that this public bond would only put Lisa in greater danger. Pax buried himself in improving tools, avoiding argument. Only Solon kept writing, his dark eyes watchful, as though measuring where the first spark of this firestorm would ignite. Trust was taking root, but so was suspicion's shadow. Verdham was no longer whole, but cracked ground waiting for the next strike to shatter it completely. A day or two after the village gathering, the air over Verdham was still thick with division. Jax's words echoed in the square, while in the alleys the Ashen cowl whispered, "The heretics have bewitched us." And above it all, the greater danger was dropping closer with every hour. The Heliox rig drifted slowly through the clouds, its massive frame glowing with rings of molten red. Each sweep sent a deep drum-like tremor through the sky, shaking down bright dust that coated every thatched roof in silver white. The villagers trembled and knelt, believing the heavens were angry. But Elara and Pax knew this was no divine punishment. It was a survey, a probing of the bright iron veins below, and its bullseye was Galdwyn Keep. Inside the makeshift command tent, Elara stood over the crude maps scrawled on the wooden table, Pax's resonance diagrams drawn over sleepless nights. Her eyes darkened. "If we don't act, the fortress will sink. The cartel will devour this whole region." Pax bit his lip, tapping the charred slate with a calloused finger. "There's one way. We can use the bright iron itself. Against them." The words froze the tent. Jax clenched his fists. Nor lowered her head. Solon gave a slow nod, already scratching down new symbols in his notebook. They all knew this wouldn't just be a test. It would be a gamble, one that might save Verdham or expose them completely. That night, beneath the dripping canopy, a small band slipped out of the village. Torches were hidden inside hollow bamboo, their footsteps muffled on wet leaves. Above them, the rig still groaned, its red glow flashing through the mist like a giant's unblinking eye. They moved toward the stone hill where the bright iron vein ran, its jagged outcrops glowing faintly blue beneath the mist. No villager had dared come near this place before. Elders whispered that the ground sleeps with fire. Pax knelt, his hands dusty, pressing a crude metal tube to the stone. The blue light rippled and hummed, a low sound like a string plucked in the wind. He looked up, eyes alight. "This is it. Bright iron resonates on its own. If we set conductor stakes around the vein and force it to oscillate at an opposing frequency, the rig will choke, like a beast swallowing stone. Elara's eyes narrowed. Risk? Pax gave a dry, humorless laugh. If we get it wrong, the resonance will shatter. This hill will blow like a powder magazine. The villagers who had come with them stepped back at once when the translator repeated the words. But one young smith, sweat still drying on his shoulders, stepped forward. If this will protect Verdham, we dig. Just show us where. Pax nodded, quickly scratching circles and intersecting lines into the dirt. The pattern took shape. Not a holy sigil, but a resonance trap disguised with stone and timber. Elara laid a hand on Pax's shoulder, her voice hard as iron. Then we have no choice. The trap must be ready before dawn. Night fell fast, smothering the hill in mist. Under the wavering torchlight, shadows bent low, digging trenches and planting tall stone stakes around the glowing vein. Pax Delane stood at the center of the circle, his voice urgent. 3 paces between each stake. They must line up with this mark. The translator carried his words cleanly, and the native blacksmiths nodded, sweat mixing with the glowing dust as they drove the stakes deep into the soil. On the perimeter, Jax Wren led a patrol of village youths, bows and crude crossbows ready in their hands. From time to time, he gripped their shoulders and whispered, "No one gets through." If you see a strange torchlight, signal at once. Their eyes no longer held doubt, only trust. Norsato moved between the dug holes, handing out bundles of herbs and tying them to each worker's wrist to ward off the bright dust from their lungs. The villagers accepted them with small nods of gratitude. Solon Aras knelt near a flat slab, scrawling secret signs in charcoal, tiny circles and paired dots, teaching the younger ones how to read them so danger could be signaled without outsiders knowing. Elara walked the line, inspecting every step. In the torchlight, she saw something remarkable. Skyfarers and villagers, once strangers, once hostile, now working as one to raise a ring of standing stones. But this was no prayer circle. It was a creation of will and science, not supplication. The sound of hammers, pounding earth, and shouted counts echoed across the hill. For the first time, both worlds moved like a single living body. But far above, the Heliox rig hovered in silence. Inside the control deck, Broker Vesk stood before a wall of shifting data, his gloved fingers tapping against the console. A Heliox technician bowed slightly. Unusual resonance detected around the southern bright iron vein, sir. It's as if someone is building a counterfield. Vesk tilted his head, the corner of his mouth curling into a cold smile. The stray Skyfarers? I've felt their trail since the day they crashed. Very well, let them reveal themselves. He snapped his fingers. From the rig's drop bay, a swarm of disguised drones descended, massive cross-shaped constructs clad in scorched metal, their seams glowing with blood-red light. As they pierced the low clouds, they ignited, floating eerily above Verdham's hills. Through speakers that had sampled the villagers' tongue, the drones boomed with thunderous voices. "The fire god has spoken! The heretics walk among you!" The sound struck the valley like a hammer, reverberating into every hut and field. Panic spread below. Some villagers fell to their knees, others fled the bright iron sight screaming. Fear of divine judgment burned hotter than the torches. On the hilltop, Elara's heart clenched as the glowing crosses drifted overhead. Pax ground his teeth and hissed, "Vesk knows we're here." He's using their faith as a weapon. High above, Vesk watched through the feed, his golden eyes glowing. He murmured almost to himself, "Bow, Verdham, bow, before your soil is nothing but ore." The red light swept over the hillside, the drones repeating their curse. "The fire god has spoken! The heretics walk among you!" Chaos erupted. Some of the villagers dropped their tools, kneeling in terror. Others ran, screaming about divine wrath. Elara's jaw locked, scanning the chaos. She could feel control slipping away. Then came the shouting from below the slope. The Ashen cowl had arrived, gray cloaks flaring, black spears raised, their silhouettes lit by the crimson glow. In that light, they looked like executioners sent by the gods. "Burn the heretics! Burn them!" Jax Wren strode forward to the head of the line of young villagers. His breath steamed in the night, his hand gripping the crossbow tight. His voice boomed over the drones. "Hold your ground! This is your land, not theirs. If you want to kneel, kneel. But if you want to live, stand with me." Dozens of young eyes wavered. Then one gripped his wooden bow and nodded. Another followed. Then another. Within moments, the youths formed a line, shoulder to shoulder, standing with Jax before the glowing hill. The clash exploded. Arrows whistled through the air, ash spears struck sparks, and the stench of blood mingled with burning soot and the metallic tang of the bright iron vein. Noor ran between the fires, throwing herbs into the flames so that white smoke rose and stung the enemy's eyes. Solon retreated to the rear, chalking danger signs onto stones for the youths to pass along. Above, the Heliox rig dropped another level, its red glow drowning the entire hill. At the center stake, Pax Delane knelt, hands shaking. If we wait any longer, they'll swallow this whole ridge. I have to trigger it now! Elara turned, her face painted crimson by the glow. She gave a single sharp nod. Pax pressed his palms to the stone. A massive hum rolled up from the earth, and a burst of blue light erupted from the conductor stakes. The resonance ring flared, shaking the entire hillside. The cross-shaped drones spasmed. One detonated mid-air, scattering fiery ash like a comet's tail. High above, the rig shuddered, its metal frame roaring in protest. The villagers froze, wide-eyed, the first time they had seen the cartel's divine machine struck back. But when the glow subsided, Pax collapsed, gasping. We triggered too early. Vesk will know. He will know. Night fell heavy as a curtain of ash. The Heliox rig hung overhead like a floating volcano, casting its oppressive red light over the hill. Below, the glowing stakes pulsed weakly, their light throbbing in time with the terrified hearts of everyone standing in the ring. The wind screamed, twisting ash into ghostly columns. Half the villagers dropped to their knees, paralyzed by fear. The other half clutched their crude weapons tighter, their eyes burning with desperate hope. The battle between sky and soil, fear and the will to live, was being fought before their eyes. Pax's resonance trap flared again. A second surge of blue shot skyward, smashing two of the cross-drones out of the air. They spiraled and exploded, raining burning shards down like a storm of meteors. The village youths roared in triumph, their cries echoing off stone and trees, turning the hill into a drum of defiance. The cartel's gods can fall! But the triumph lasted only a single breath. The ground shuddered violently. The rig rotated, its massive body groaning with a sound so deep it felt like a beast inhaling. Its red glow narrowed, condensing into a single blazing eye fixed on the resonance circle. Elara lifted her face, heart pounding, hair whipping in the crimson wind. In that instant she knew. Vesk had found his challenger. The sky split with a scarlet flash. A column of energy speared down, straight and merciless as a divine blade. The earth exploded, ash whipped upward into a cyclone, and red and blue fire tangled like two dragons locked in combat. Pax staggered, his trembling hand still pressed to the central stake. The stone beneath them howled as though ready to burst. Elara screamed into the storm, "Pax! Shut it down, now, or the whole hill will blow!" Her voice was nearly lost in the chaos, but everyone felt it. This was the moment everything would be decided. The bright iron vein boomed like a war drum tearing apart. Cracks of glowing blue split the ground, shining like lightning trapped under the soil. Stakes wrenched free, launching like spears into the air. Ash turned the night into a blizzard, and the rig's red glow merged with it until sky and earth became one vast storm. Villagers screamed in terror. Some fled down the slope. Others fell to their faces, begging the god for mercy. Elara's eyes swept the chaos. Order was seconds from breaking completely. The last two cross-drones exploded in showers of burning cinders. But the brief victory was swallowed at once by what came next. The rig roared, pivoting its core. Its red light burned hotter, a molten furnace gaping wide. The great resonance rings along its spine convulsed, charging for the true strike. The real blow was coming, and if it landed, the hill would not survive. Jack spun around, shouting at the villagers as they backed away. "Not gods! Just metal monsters! Stand your ground!" But his voice was swallowed by the roar of the earth and the rig's shriek. Those who had once cheered him now trembled, eyes darting. A young man dropped his wooden bow and clutched his head. "No. No one can fight that thing!" The words cut through the fragile spark of courage. Noor lunged forward, seized his hand, and shoved a pouch of herbs against his chest. "Don't let go! Drop your weapon now and you lose everything!" But even Noor felt her own heart quiver. Elara stared at the shattered conduit posts, then at the fleeing villagers, then up at the massive rig-building power overhead. In that moment, she knew. Pax's trap had worked, partly, but the price was the full attention of the cartel. And when the cartel focused its firepower here, it wouldn't just be the bright iron hill that burned. Verdham itself would be ash. The massive rig shuddered in the sky, its frame glowing bright. Energy rings shifted. Instead of aiming at the battlefield hill, it slowly turned, locking on the west, where the gray walls of Galdwyn Keep jutted from the fog. Red light bathed the fortress like a giant's hand tightening around Verdham's throat. The villagers turned as one toward the keep. A scream broke out. "The keep! They want to swallow the fortress!" Inside the control chamber, drenched in crimson glow, Broker Vesk stood before the hollow map. His long, cold fingers traced the glowing ley lines. A trembling technician spoke up. "Sir, the resonance disrupted our rhythm, but the keep's core is packed with bright iron. If we drain it, we'll destroy their defenses and double the yield." Vesk narrowed his eyes, lips curling in a thin smile. "Correct. Break their spine, and the ore will flow into my hand. Begin core drain prep." A hollow flared beside him, High Seer Varric's ashen face flickering in the red light. His voice rasped like wind over burning coals. "Slow it down, Broker. I want my people to watch the fire god's judgment. Faith needs blood and ash to endure." Vesk glanced at him, gold light cold in his eyes. "You'll get your ash. I'll get my ore. Don't forget, your god is just the chain I use to bind them." The hologram winked out. The rig howled louder, red light spiraling into a furious vortex over the keep. On the hill, the villagers watched the beam descend, fear spreading like a plague. A woman collapsed, wailing, "My son is in there! Please save him!" Cries and desperate pleas filled the air, choking it even heavier. Elara's jaw clenched, eyes locked on the swelling red glow. This wasn't just intimidation, this was the annihilation of Verdham in one decisive strike. The Academy's mandate echoed in her mind. Never reveal over-threshold tech to a pre-contact civilization. It was the highest safeguard, meant to keep worlds like Verdham from being shattered by off-world ambition. She had sworn to uphold it, but now the rig's crimson light was about to erase Galdwyn Keep and everyone inside. Elara looked at the villagers before her, the ones who had dug trenches with them, driven stakes, taken Noor's medicines, learned to shoot bows under Jax's hand. They weren't a primitive culture anymore. They had names, faces, memories crashed back, Wayfarer's crash, the witchfire that had made the villagers believe demons had fallen from the sky. The blood, the loss, all because they were here. If the keep fell, history would say her silence killed a people. Beside her, Noor whispered, voice trembling. "Elara, they'll all die." Pax was still on his knees by the conduit, shouting over the earth's roar. "If we don't use the device, we have no chance." Jax stood in front of Lysa, eyes pleading, silent, as if handing their fate entirely to his commander. Elara felt the pouch at her hip, heavy as lead. Inside lay the forbidden device, one piece of tech enough to expose the entire crew to the cartel. If she used it, Wayfarer's existence would be laid bare. But if she didn't, Galdwyn Keep would become a crater of ash. In that instant, she understood. This was no longer about a single expedition. This was the balance of two worlds, the future resting in her hand. Through the red haze, the neutral elder limped forward on his staff and sank to his knees before her. His hands trembled as they clutched the hem of her cloak, tears streaking his wrinkled cheeks. "You carry fire from the sky. If you are not demons, then save the keep. Generations of us have lived and died within those walls. Please, don't let it turn to ash." Villagers pressed closer. A young mother screamed, clutching her shivering child. "My son is still inside the fortress. If he dies, my soul dies with him. Please, save him!" Her cry mingled with the wind, stabbing into Elara's ears like knives she couldn't pull out. The youths who had once followed Jax into battle raised their bows and shouted, "If the keep falls, Verdham falls. Starborn, stand with us. If we must, we die together, but give us a chance to fight." There was no fear left in their eyes, only the blaze of defiance. In the chaos, Lysa ran forward, gripping Jax's hand, then locking eyes with Elara. Her voice broke, but each word came clear through the translator. "We have no true gods to shield us. If the keep falls, all we are will vanish. Please, please save us." Her silver eyes shone with despair, yet a final glint of hope. Elara stood in the center of their stares, the elder kneeling, the women weeping, the youths shouting, Lysa pleading. It all pressed down on her like a weight she could no longer escape. Her heart pounded, her hand closing tight on the pouch with the forbidden device. Above, the Heliox rig roared, its colossal body turning like an artificial planet. The crimson energy ring widened, then narrowed, focusing on the keep's roof. Red light twisted into a spear aimed straight down, ready to strike like the sword of a merciless god. The fortress walls shook, stone crumbling, shards of glowing bright iron flashing like they were about to erupt. Pax stayed kneeling, hands shaking on the conduit post, his face streaked with ash and sweat. He looked up at Elara. "If we don't use it now, we're done. We have no time left." Noor pushed forward, voice breaking. "Elara, they're begging us!" "Look at the children, look at that baby. We can't turn away." Jack said nothing. He only held Lisa's hand tighter and stared at Elara, eyes tormented but steady, like he had given his life into her command. Elara felt as though she stood between two cliffs. On one side, the iron rule of the Council, the code that kept Earth civilization from collapsing into chaos when meeting primitive worlds. On the other, the faces around her, crying, pleading, hoping. Both pulled her in opposite directions, and choosing one meant losing the other forever. Two voices warred in her head. "Hold the line." "Save them." The rig's thunder above pounded like a war drum, driving her heartbeat wild. She bent down, fingers clutching the pouch at her hip. Inside was the forbidden device, an energy core never meant to be revealed to a pre-contact world. The pouch trembled with her heartbeat. Her fingers brushed the cold metal, and a shiver ran through her. The crowd fell silent, every eye locked on that tiny motion. In that moment, Elara became the center of the sky and earth alike, as though the fate of two worlds had narrowed to the choice in her hand. The rig roared, the column of red light beginning its descent, only a few breaths from striking the keep's roof. Elara lifted her head, face bathed in crimson, lips parting to shout her final order, but her words were swallowed by the roar of the earth. The image froze in that instant, her hand clenching. The device, one small motion enough to turn fate on its axis. The sky became an ocean of fire. The massive rig blazed red, flooding all of Verdham. Spears of light sliced through the night like 1,000 blades, staining trees, stone, and terrified faces in blood. Under that glow, Galdwyn Keep shuddered, its ancient stones cracking, dust raining down like ash. On the bright iron hill, the villagers dropped to their knees, weeping. The youths screamed, but their voices vanished in the storm's roar. Pax shouted himself hoarse. Noor clutched the child, shielding it from the crush of the crowd. Jax held Lisa's hand as if swearing a silent vow. All eyes fixed on Elara. She was the only anchor left. Elara trembled, her hand locking around the forbidden device. Her lips parted, the red glow turning her into a figure both savior and demon. Half her heart ached to shout the command. The other half clung to the law that had defined her life. In that instant, she felt torn in two, dangling over a precipice. The rig's roar deepened. The column of light struck the keep, stone exploding, ancient walls quaking. The villagers' screams echoed across the valley. Elara squeezed the device, drew a breath, ready to speak, when in the midst of the crimson chaos, Solon Aras lifted his head. His eyes caught something else. A thin green flash streaking through the sky, vanishing into the void. He knew it wasn't the rig's glow. It was a ping from the Wayfarer, loosed in the instant of resonance peak. The sight clenched his chest. And from that light, Solon's mind reeled backward to the days before, when they first touched the secret still sleeping beneath the ground. His memory swept him to a gray afternoon, Ardanor whined sighing through misty woods. He and Noor Sato followed the carved symbols etched into cliffside stone to the place the locals called the Forbidden Cave. The rock opened into a narrow passage, leading down into the cold earth. Damp air brushed their faces, carrying the smell of black algae on wet stone. In the dark, they found a short silver pillar, crusted with moss and mold. Its surface bore faint spiral lines, glowing like the witchfire patterns they had seen the night Wayfarer fell. Solon laid his hand on it. A thin green pulse rippled along the grooves, like the heartbeat of something still alive. Not dead stone, Noor whispered. "It's breathing." Solon swallowed hard. "It's a beacon. A call signal. Someone came here before us, and it never stopped." They stood in silence, listening to pebbles drop from the cave's dome. Solon pulled out his old notebook, sketching every line and spiral, then compared them to Wayfarer's circuitry. That night, he and Pax Delane sat by torchlight, piecing each symbol into the ship's old energy schematics. What they discovered stunned them. This beacon could resonate with every vein of bright iron across Verdham, a technology far beyond anything a medieval world could wield. Even after that long night, the witchfire marks burned in Solon's, mine like a scar he couldn't erase, but his next memory carried him to another night, where ash and wind turned, the moat of Galdwyn. Keep into a dark mirror, ash, fell into the water, leaving ripples that widened and died. Jax Wren stood there, Nor's bandages still binding his shoulder. Beside him was Lisa Morwen, her hair dusted gray with ash, her weary eyes still shining in the dark. Jax stayed silent for a long moment, then exhaled, his voice rough. I never thought Verdham would be the place I'd call home, but if the sky falls, I'll still stand with you. I swear it. Lisa lowered her head, her cold, trembling fingers brushing his calloused hand. If the keep falls, everything falls. But if you are here, I won't leave. No rings, no vows, only 2 hands clasped tight and a promise carved into the ashen wind, live or die, together. In Solin's memory, the night after Jax and Lisa made their vow by the moat, the Wayfarer camp still flickered with torchlight. Pax Delane hunched over an old circuit cluster salvaged from the ship before the villagers dismantled it. He reconnected the conduits, overlaying the resonance map Solin had copied in the cave. Then the ground trembled faintly, bright iron across the valley resonating with the cartel rig's rhythm. One pulse over threshold, and the cluster flared bright, sending a thin green ping into the sky, vanishing into the heavy dark. Nor, sitting nearby, gasped. What just went out? Pax drew a deep breath, hands shaking. It wasn't meant for us. It's a failsafe signal, maybe centuries old. If anyone is still listening, they'll know Ardanor is still lit. Solin watched the glow fade, a knot forming in his chest. One thought struck him. Savior or new disaster? Who would answer? The green flash of memory vanished, yanking him back to the deafening roar of the present. The ground of Ardanor shook violently. Overhead, the Heliox rig rotated, its crimson glow twisting into a vast vortex, hanging over Galdwyn Keep like a blade about to fall. The bright iron hill split apart, ash stinging faces. Villagers held their breath, some crying into their hands, others staring skyward. Pax shouted until his voice broke, Elara! There's no time! Elara Wynn stood among the shattered posts, her coat heavy with ash, clinging to her body. The pouch on her chest felt as though the sky itself pressed down on it. Inside, the forbidden device thrummed with her heartbeat. In that instant, she saw it all. Solin's face pale with fear, Noor clutching the native child, Jax gripping Lisa's hand like it was his last tether to hope. And behind them, hundreds of Verdham eyes placing all their lives in her hands. Elara closed her eyes, took a slow breath. When she opened them, the sky's crimson glow reflected in her gaze, turning them into twin fires. Her hand tightened on the switch. Her lips parted, ready to. The sky over Ardanor still burned red. The Heliox rig hung like a colossal hammer, ready to crush Galdwyn Keep at any second. On the fractured hill, Captain Elara Wynn stood motionless, the switch trembling in her grasp with every beat of her heart. One choice, save a civilization or uphold the law, balanced on the knife's edge. And in that moment, all of Ardanor held its breath. But the answer will not come here. Part 1B closes, leaving its promise for what comes next. In Part 2, the truth behind the signal that was sent will begin to surface. The enemy will not only descend from distant stars, but rise from those who once flew the same banner as Wayfarer. The battle for Ardanor has only just begun.